Hello, and that is right, it is time to review this, the QNAP TS-464. It's pretty much their flagship series, and by that what I mean, most NAS brands have their own kind of their darling device. They'll have the super powerful desktops, and they'll have monstrous rack mounts for enterprise, and right at the bottom of the tiers they'll have those really affordable units that can do little tiny tasks, and they've got value splattered all over them. But right there in the middle is the Prosumer, the SMB. These are the fully featured units. This is the tier that it's supposed to be, that all of the things that the brand can offer, they say that if you go with them for your data you'll have, are possible. Under this tier you have slight compromises in terms of the wide range of users or the actual applications themselves. This is where things get interesting. And in the case of this device, the TS-464, QNAP are banking quite a lot on this system for several reasons. It is the latest release in their fully featured range of solutions. Before this, it was the 53D. From there, a 2, a 4 and a 6 bay series. We know this is available in 2, 4 and 6 bays as well. But moreover than that, they have had a few little PR bumps, like ransomware attacks that have been perpetrated on their systems. People trying to exploit vulnerabilities that were found in Linux, in QNAP. There's just generally, as a brand, they have to have gone through, and they, if they don't already, going for a period of redemption. And it's this idea with their brand, they are great at the hardware, and if there's something you're going to take from this video, their hardware is chef's kiss. This is by far the best flagship SMB prosumer NAS in this tier I've ever seen, okay? But when it comes to the software, although you have a wide range of software, you have a wide range of customization, and you have a wide range of flexibility on their platform, it has to be said that at the moment they are licking their wounds a tiny bit. And hopefully if you're watching this a year or so from now, maybe this is all ancient history, but it has to be something I think a lot of you coming into this video may have already read before going in. But that's a little bit more about software. This video is about hardware. We want to focus specifically on the hardware of this device because a number of you buy QNAP for that. You buy it for the hardware. And as far as this device is concerned, what you're getting for that price tag is still a marked degree higher than anyone else in the market. So before we go any further, let's unbox this. This system arrives around that 500 to 600 nicker mark, depending on where you are in the world. I will add, it comes in different variations of memory as well, so that will affect the price. They've gone with that brown box packaging, very similar to the predecessors packaging. It's just, unfortunately, just out of shot over there. If we have a look at, we do have a comparison with the 53D series coming soon. So first, we've got a hard phone. We have our box of accessories. So again, with this system, you won't get the hard drives or SSDs included. You'll have to opt for brands like WD or Seagate for your storage media or SSDs. We have an external power supply unit there. This is a 90 watt PSU, and again, I know some of you quite like internal PSUs. This is a plastic external, metal internal system, so noise is kind of a concern, and also active airflow and cooling. In that scenario, an external PSU makes a lot more sense and way easier to replace. The PSU is still the second most fragile part of any system. Power mains lead there. Information on the warranty. The system arrives with 3 years of hardware warranty, and the software just has years, some of its lifetime. But on top of that, you can extend the warranty by another couple of years as well. It's an optional choice, and there's a setup manual as well. Ignore it, there's not much going on with that. Personally, I would immediately opt for the online resources. I know not everyone does, but I would in this case. We also have screws for 2.5 inch and 3.5 inch storage media. This system supports hard drives and SSDs over SATA, but it also has an extra little thing thrown in there for SSDs that I'll talk about later on. And we have a single LAN cable, Cat5e. Again, this is a 2.5G box, something I'll talk about later, so we don't really need bigger cables than that. Although I will say there's only the one cable, the predecessor had 2. But again, we're not going to, it's only a single cable there. So that is our accessories. Let's chuck that there out of shot. And there is our NAS. Before we go any further, talk about foam again. I know it's silly to talk about foam, but me personally, I'm all about protective packaging. Silent damage in motion, pressure, just movement damage in these systems. They're a lot more fragile than people give them credit for, even when there's no storage media inside. And I will harshly judge any brand that produces a solution that costs more than 500 nicker and only coats it in cardboard. To me, that is worrisome, to say the least. But again, that's all of our accessories. And we can start opening this bad boy up. Have a little look. Move that there. Slide this out. And again, when I do start talking about the hardware inside this device, don't lose sight of the size of this NAS. Again, one-handed grabbing here, that is the front of that chassis there. Don't worry, it's only slightly missed because it's got the plastic on the front. But as you can see there, we've got power button there at the top. We have multiple LEDs here for denoting hard drive and SSD health, network connectivity, system activity. But probably for me, the most important, and well, okay, importance pushing it, the most interesting is this down here, this USB. Now this is the USB one-touch copy port. So what that means is you can run using at least 2, maybe even 3 technically applications in this system that allow you to connect a USB drive to this system. One touch, copy the data over in either direction. You can also do differential backups, where only the data that has changed has been backed up. You can do schedule, you can do automatic disconnection, and stuff like that, or ejection even. But what's really intriguing, as you may have noticed, is that drive, that port is red. That red port there means it is USB 3.2 Gen 2, 1000 megabytes per second connectivity there. So when you're dealing with a 4-bay, if you go with bigger drives or smaller drives, there's still a lot of data. And having a faster backup is going to save you time if you're going to connect a drive, back it up, and take that drive away. And again, that can go for a drive that you use regularly, that you want to back up to the NAS periodically every day with your ongoing project, your schoolwork, whatever, or the other way around, where you want to have a wired USB backup to the QNAP, and then periodically it backs up. Now, 1000 megs, QNAP seems to be the only brand at the moment that are fleshing out their systems, even at the flagship, the kind of mid-level systems with USB 3.2 Gen 2. And again, there is another port on the back that I'll talk about in a bit. But still, I'm really impressed that they're including that on these systems and not just the higher tiers where they think there will be that larger frequency and volume of data. Now, the front panel on this device, semi-translucent. Click the side and you can remove the side of the panel. And inside we find 4 bays there. Nice and easy, 4 bays of storage there on the front. 3.5 inch, they're click and load designed as well, so you don't have to worry about utilising a screwdriver or anything like that. Again, plastic tray, screw holes at the bottom. You remove the sides, you put the drive inside, nice and easy, and it installs. It's that straightforward. Put that down there. Again, you can run this system on a single drive if you choose. You don't have to fully populate it. It takes advantage of RAID. So you've got your RAID 1 mirrors, your RAID 0 combining everything, your RAID 5 1 disk parity, your RAID 6 2 disk parity, your RAID 10, that sort of thing. They're all supported on this system. Also, this system takes advantage of ext4 based software on QTS version 5 at the time of recording. So no ZFS here. Although the rest of the architecture is really, really good, that CPU is not going to be able to hit the high that you're going to need for a ZFS-based system. And if you look inside, we've got those SATA ports there at the back, all neatly lined up for your SATA connections. But what's really intriguing is that little side panel there. You see that? Now, we've got our memory that we'll talk about later on. But if you look very carefully, and again, maybe I'll take the unit apart, but I will have images over on NAS Compares. We have one bay. We have another bay, that L shape there. That's because this system also features M2 SSD bays. Now, that's not strictly new. Let's be honest, QNAP themselves are not the first brand to roll out M2 NVMe SSD bays on their system. That would go to Synology. They were the first to bring that to market. However, this system allows to have those 2 bays and some other stuff that I'll talk about later on, with those drives being usable as raw storage. You can use WD drives or Seagate drives if you choose, but it's the idea that you can put those SSDs inside and utilize them, sure, for caching, assist the read and write activity of your larger RAID hard drive array, or create a Q tier within this system where it combines hard drives and SSDs into a single storage pool and then intelligently moves the data onto the SSD or the hard drive depending on its priority and frequency of access. I know that sounds like caching, but it's not. Caching creates duplicates and copies of files and moves it onto the SSD, whereas Q tier actually moves it to an appropriate storage volume. But of course, this also means that you can use it for just a storage pool. You can stick an SSD inside those bays, and again, we will do a full detailed software review on this along with some Plex stuff and bits and bobs like that, and we'll talk about those SSD bays. But the idea you can create, along with those 4 bays of storage, an additional 2 SSD storage pool, I am loving that. It's the idea that this now becomes a 2-tier storage system where I can put my data in those individual pools. But you can even go further than that, but I'll touch on that in a moment. But I will add, and we'll talk a little bit about the CPU too in a moment, that those N2 NVMe slots are limited. They are NVMe Gen 3 times 4. So what that means, that PCIe I should say, not NVMe, that means that architecture of those slots, you can only get up to 1,000 megabytes per second performance in each slot because of that architecture. Now, most PCIe Gen 3 times 4 SSDs on the market can give you about 3,000. So you are being significantly cut down. You can RAID them and get that performance there, but those M2 NVMe slots there are not fully fledged 3 times 4s. Now, the reason for that is to do with the CPU. Now, the CPU inside this system, following the legacy of the 53D and the 53B and BE and A series before it, it is taking advantage of a Celeron-based processor. They're not alone in that. Celerons are used at this tier by every single brand. Synology, QNAP, Asus, you name it, they're all using them. So they have to still work within those Celerons. There's been occasional dalliances with Pentium, but ultimately to stay within this price bracket for their portfolio of all of those solutions I mentioned in the introduction, the result is that this system needs to probably go Celeron. Now, at the moment, the Celeron inside this is the N5105 or the N5095, I should say. Now, why is there 2 CPUs? This is something that is going to reflect the previous year, so 2021 and 2022, in releases that you're going to see. You're going to see lots of NASes that list multiple CPUs. The reason is that Intel, during the pandemic and because of semiconductor shortages and changes in buyer trends and droughts in Taiwan and all kinds of a myriad of different things, the result was that whereas Intel would normally refresh their range with a new version of that CPU every couple to 3 years, they had multiple different versions rolling out. So brands that were relying, and this includes laptops and notebooks and stuff, that rely on Celeron-based processors for their efficiency and 24/7 use, had to choose between all of them. And the result is that the N5105 and the N5095 CPUs are near enough identical. There is the tiniest whiff of a difference, which comes down to the CPU having slightly higher video encode decode, but by slight I mean so small you'll almost never see it, and that's on the N5105. Now, this system, I will be doing Plex testing on that, and hopefully we can get 2 systems with each of the CPUs so I can run a test and show you how similar they are. But the other thing about that CPU is the advantages, and dare I say, in some small cases, disadvantages it brings to the table. So the CPU runs on a 2.0 gigahertz quad-core architecture. Those cores can be burst up to 2.9 gigahertz, lovely and close to 3 gigahertz. It also has a hardware transcoding engine built into it, thanks to it having embedded graphics on board and an encryption engine too. So it's got onboard HD graphics, which can deal with 4K as well. And we will be doing in that Plex testing, chuck some 4K, some 1080p at it. But the other thing it brings to the table is support of up to 16 gig of DDR4 memory. So by default, you can get this system with 4 gig of memory. And if I have a little look inside and remove that memory, you can upgrade it over 2 SODIMM slots to a maximum 16 gigabytes, which again for home users or business users that are running lots of cameras, lots of backups at once, 16 gig is a lot of memory to potentially hit. Now, it's arriving with ADATA, DDR4 non-ECC memory, but it's 2666 megahertz, so faster than the 2400 in its predecessor that we'll be comparing against. I'll pop that back in later. But again, it's a lovely clean arrangement inside that system there. You can see the CPU under its big heat sink there. You can see the M2 slots. But when it comes to interacting with the device, as good as that performance threshold and that extra SSD storage in that inside is, we need to talk about external. And if we turn this device around, we can see firstly that big old fan there at the rear. It's a single 120mm fan that can be adjusted in the software. But what's really intriguing are all of these lovely ports. Let's talk about those there. So first up, there is that USB 3.2 Gen 2, the second port there to go with the one at the front. That is not, by the way, a USB Type-C port. That's a Kensington lock. We've also got two USB 2 ports that normally I would rag on this brand and say how much I don't like them, but given the inclusion of those faster USB ports and the fact that this system's got the HDMI to create a keyboard, video, mouse setup, fair play to them. I'm all right with the USB 2 in this scenario, and I think at this point, as we go through all of these ports and connections and everything we've talked about thus far, you'll see that the PCI lanes and chipset of this system have been pushed as far as possible to allow all this to happen. Next up, the HDMI port. It's an HDMI 2.0 port. That means 4K at 60 frames per second. I hate seagulls. That means with the video out, with its parallel application, you can use it for surveillance, for multimedia, for office stuff, for using all kinds of the Linux Ubuntu VM deployment tool on there. There's the remote control, which is optional, which is a real shame. Overall, I still like that QNAP support HDMI. I just wish they did more updates to that software, because they've updated a lot of their different software and apps recently. But HD Station hasn't really been updated for close to 2 years now, and I'd love to see more progress on that. Now at the bottom, we've got those 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports. That's right, this system, again, we're in 2022 now. I don't want to see 1 GBE in anything with an Intel-based processor anymore. I'll let it slide on more affordable systems, the ones that have got like Realtek and Marvell and stuff like that, but I'm not having it anymore on Intel. We're not, it's this point now where not only is 2.5 GBE on a production line level virtually identical to 1 gigabit Ethernet in price point, but now we're starting to see everything from standard PCs and computers and cameras arriving with 2.5 GBE to routers from your internet service provider. And if they are providing 2.5 GBE, I think it's madness that if I could be at my home working away and I try to connect to the data on my NAS on 1 GBE, that there I have the potential with greater than gigabit Ethernet and a 2.5G router to get faster speeds with my remote cloud than the NAS in my office. So if it doesn't have 2.5 GBE moving forward, I'm going to give it a bad time. So each of those ports can provide up to around 260, 270 megabytes per second, and you can lag them or port trunk them to go over to the 5 GBE mark there as well. So again, good potential options for performance there, but that's not the end of the road, because you may have noticed at the top of the system there, a PCIe upgrade slot. That means that this system can have more added to it. That is a PCIe Gen 3 x 2 slot. So again, that the architecture of that CPU has been splintered off into all these areas, and there's been a pinch of compromise. That would have been nice to see a PCIe Gen 3 x 4 like some of their beefier systems, but then we might not have had the M2 slots inside. We might not have had the USB ports on this. We might not have been able to have 16 gig of memory. So I'm prepared. I'd rather have a 2000 megs per second PCIe slot than not have all the other features as well. And the thing is, you can get things like this combination cards, or you can go for 10 GBE 1 and 2 port cards in this system. So not only have you got 2.5 GBE on 2 ports there, but you could add another 10 gig port there easily for less than 100 nicker and add 1000 megabytes of performance. Add a 2 port card, you got your 2000 megs of performance. Or go for a combo card that will allow you to not only add 10 gigabit connection there over the network, but also allow you to add more SSDs, add another tier of SSD storage. This card alone, it has 2 M2 slots on board, so you could put this inside there, and yes, you'd still only have 2000 megs bandwidth to play with, which could be problematic, but it still allows you to add further super fast storage to this 4-bay system, thereby expanding its overall storage potential long term. The plastic chassis does mean that it runs, a lot quieter, but the bigger the industrious hard drives you might be looking at, the more noise they're going to make. Let's get this chassis off of here. And overall, when it comes to the internal and external hardware architecture, I'm really impressed by it. That CPU, although some of you might be wondering, I'm not going to go for a Celeron, that's a bit budget, it's a bit low end. It's probably one of the best Celerons out there. There's only one that I can think of, the J6412, that's better than this. And again, that's probably too new and too expensive. There are obviously other Celeron processors in the market, but they've got to be data center grade. They've got to be 24/7 utilization in terms of their efficiency. And that processor ranks over 4,000 on CPU benchmark. It rated last check 4,161, which is a marked improvement over the 3,000 rating of this system's predecessor. So again, higher rating there, higher overall performance, and just more CPU lanes for the rest of the system to do its thing. So if we remove that side of that case off, it's just a plastic internal chassis. If you have a look inside, we've got our bays of SATA storage there, no loose wires. At the top, we've got our PCIe upgrade slot there at the top, that 3x2 slot there. And if we bring it round there, you're able to see a lot better there, that CPU inside there, the memory slot, we've just removed that memory, and the 2 M2 NVMe slots there either side. It's surprisingly well presented given there's a huge amount of hardware inside this plucky little 4-bay box here that you can have running on for your home or business needs. Overall, I like it. I can't fault this system on its hardware. I told you in the introduction, it is by far one of the best, if not the best, kind of prosumer SMB 4-bays available in the market right now. I don't think you're going to find a system that gives you more hardware and bang for your buck. I do think, again, QNAP and their software, they've still taken their lumps, and maybe again you're watching this in the future and that's largely something of the past, but with their software as a brand, they've still got all of the features, all of the software, but I think they could spend a little bit more time in QA, quality control, quality assurance on those apps. Can't fault the hardware, you can do loads with it, and that software is still, as long as you have your backups in place and as long as you don't rely on overly simplistic security, this is going to be a great system, and that software inside. And QNAP have made tremendous jumps in their platform with regards to the defaults, disabling admin, creating openings in your router and network there, using Security Counselor to guide you through the right way to do things. They are clearly doing things. It's just right now they've got a lot of that kind of guilt they need to get rid of, and hopefully that won't impact this system, because I think a lot of you are looking at a 4-bay NAS in 2022 or even 2023. This is one of the best in the market that I've seen, and I just hope that QNAP's reputation for that ransomware stuff that may have hurt it in the past isn't going to be detrimental to it long term. I love the hardware ports. I love what it includes. I love that there's not really anything in modern NAS that this doesn't already provide. Yes, it's had its little wings clipped a little bit in terms of its bandwidth in places, which it's had to do in order to spread itself over all those ports and connections. And as long as QNAP don't do anything silly with the pricing and just keep it at the exact same price as that of the 453D, I think this could easily enter one of my top 4 bays of the year. If not at the top, then definitely in the top 3. But this has been my hardware review of the TS-464. I will be doing a shorter review process of this video called the Should You Buy, where I'll talk about the 5 things I like and 5 things I'm less keen on. But other than that, look out for my Plex Media Server testing, look for my software overview and full review of this system, and we're going to be doing some unofficial memory upgrades as well, so do stay tuned for those. And there should be a full review linked in the description over at NAS Compare, so do check that out. Thank you so much for watching. If you have, click like, it helps me understand what I'm doing right. Click subscribe if you want to learn more, and do take advantage of the free advice section over on NAS Compare. It's genuinely free, made by two humans, me and Eddie the web guy. We get way too many comments on YouTube to be able to respond to every one, and the free advice section allows us to answer every question on a first come first served basis. You'll have to put your email in. We don't do anything with it, couldn't care. There's donate buttons, use them, ignore them, it's up to you. We're just there to help you with unbiased advice. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.